Coloring Crypto.
All right, folks, welcome to Coloring Crypto, the end of 2017 edition. And we have a special treat in store. We've got the entire team behind the making of Coloring Crypto. Let's start with the newest member, Aaron Garber. He is our audio producer. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, what's going on?
And then we've got our content producer, Dan Weiner. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Gabe. Pleasure to be here.
Aaron's in the Bay Area. Dan, where are you?
I'm currently freezing my ass off in Maine.
How cold is it?
It's like 3 degrees.
And then finally, we've got our executive producer, Andrew Chapin. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm good, Gabe. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm sitting in my new spot in LA, and I'm really getting forward to discussing this. I've kind of been like taking notes and going through some of the old episodes. This is episode 17, and it's the wrap up for 2017. And we're going to go over some of the old episodes, discuss our highlights, our favorites, talk about what we've been up to, what we've learned in cryptocurrency since we started this whole thing. And then we're going to go into predictions, which we've solicited from some of our former guests and the general audience. So do you guys recall like the very first episode with Josh Goldbard?
Of course.
That was one. That was the one.
I listen to it every night before I go to bed. Of course.
I remember. So Dan, basically the way the process works, I'll do the recording, hand it off to Dan. Dan cuts out all of my stutters and ums and sort of repetitive content. And Dan, what was the first episode that you did the entire edit on?
The one after Anna.
With Brooks. Yeah, because that's right. Because that was the long interview, and that was the first one, and so we decided to cut it into two pieces. In the first one, I was so hyper and kind of like nervous and sort of like didn't know Josh at all from Crypto Lotus, our first guest. He's a hedge fund manager, and it was so full of like stutters and excitement and dumb questions. It ended up, I think we cut out like 60% of it. But I look back on it now, and one of my favorite thing that he said is the fastest, like what is cryptocurrency? And he defined it in a sense of the value of what this was. And he said it's the fastest way to send money between untrusted parties. And that's been a statement that's kind of like, as I've learned more about this, it still holds meaning and still kind of like makes me realize what that means and how there is this sort of potency in cryptocurrency. Do you guys realize? Do you guys have any specific highlights from the first episode or even the second one with Anna?
I think in regards to the first episode with Josh, it was like, I mean, it was a way to start a podcast, right? I mean, we were talking about getting something off the ground, even going before the first episode. It was like, hey, how can we learn more specifically, Gabe? How could you learn a lot more as somebody who came into this knowing not really that much? And I think you realized after the first episode alone, it's like, whoa, I'm way in over my head right now. And I think just having Josh for the first guest it did two things. I think one, it like immediately peaked. It's like, okay, there are like 5 or 6 points you can make that would just send you off into a tangent. But two, it allowed you to, okay, let's reel it back a little bit. Let's, ask the early questions first. Let's grow and learn together. So I think it was like a blessing and a curse at the same time to have such a good guest to start the show, where it's like, okay, this guy clearly knows a lot and has been doing it for a while. But it also, I think, set the stage for, well, now let's tone back the questions and let's not dig a hole 6 feet deep. Let's start by just putting one shovel in the ground.
Like I'm curious, Aaron, what you think of this quote. If you could translate this for us, because it's one I heard at the time. It's the highlight from episode 1. And I look back at it now and I'm like, I did not understand what that meant. And now I feel like I do. So Josh said, quote, "The Ethereum network is a bunch of computers all over planet Earth that are running what is called the Ethereum master node software." What, Aaron, do you think that means?
I mean, my knowledge of cryptocurrency is not quite as up to snuff as the rest of you guys.
We'll let you off.
So that just sounds like magic or something to me. But
we'll let you off the hook. And just to let our audience know, Aaron joined us 3 or 4 episodes back, and for those people that were blasted in their ears by loud horns and bad sound, that has been solved.
It's all Dan's fault.
Yeah. I went back and listened to
Let's not point any fingers here.
Yeah. Aaron, thanks for joining us and fixing our audio. Moving on to episode 2. Episode 2 was a friend of mine from Hawaii, Anna Ariel, who is just a super excited, passionate crypto trader. So we went from a hedge fund manager to just an investor. And it was really funny. In the beginning, she talked about hiring somebody, who she pays to get crypto advice. And I don't know if you could tell from my questions at the time, but I kept kind of like hinting around, like, why would somebody pay for crypto advice? Like, if the person you're paying is kind of a consultant, shouldn't they be making all the money they want off of their own inside tips? And she just kind of kept harping to it. Now I look back and I'm like, I think this is really what happens in crypto a lot, is that people are paying for analysis, but also kind of like first insights and, sort of buy-ins. What are you guys' thoughts on paying for crypto advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I certainly shared with you. I shared that viewpoint with you, that I was just kind of like, oh, that seems really scammy and really schemy. And I still generally, feel that way, because there's no real way to understand motives. There's no real way to kind of, really understand like why this person is selling this advice. But at the same time, more recently, I've really kind of come into realize that a lot of people are doing this, and a lot of people are making a lot of money doing it. There's kind of this whole like subculture of just these like, these pump groups and things like that. And for better or for worse, there's a lot of activity around doing all that. I know some people who, I've now talked to a few people who've made like a lot of money doing that. They're making a few $100s a day or a few $1,000s a day. And I get it. I mean, that's if you have easy money and you just have to pay this guy, or this girl to give you the tips. I mean, why wouldn't you do that?
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my Facebook feed at this point, 3 months in, is I'd say 80% of the ads are for some kind of crypto thing. The first ad, which I finally hid yesterday, was from the James Altucher promotion.
Oh, I'm so tired of that,
dude. He's on Google, on the internet, on Facebook. He's like selling his. I think it's like $50 and for 1 year of his kind of like package. And then you've got like John McAfee, who every day promotes a single cryptocurrency. And around that, I've heard people say like he's just pumping and dumping. He's just buying this and then promoting it the next day, and it goes up 15, 20%, and he sells. But yeah, I mean, my other thought with James Altucher is like, wait a minute, maybe I should be doing this. I should be selling, with the podcast, be selling some kind of subscription thing. And I hated it, but I almost signed up for it just to see what he's doing, because my suspicion is it's just a bunch of like compilations of definitions of cryptocurrency. But I don't know, or maybe he's doing some pumping stuff, dumb stuff. Are you guys seeing the same kind of proliferation of people selling sort of crypto education packages?
This is a little different, but ever since I started, working for the podcast, I just got a new phone. I got a Pixel 2, and Google knows everything. So they pretty much just tailor cryptocurrency stories to me. Like my entire like curated newsfeed on my phone is just cryptocurrency and nothing else.
How many are ads, or is it all just news?
It's all just news for me. So it's not ads.
I think that some of these things really speak to the issue of governance and regulation and things like that. I mean, I've talked to, just out of curiosity and interest, I've talked to a lot of people who are involved in one of the coins that McAfee's been kind of pumping the last few weeks. And there's no coordination in that case, at least as far as I can tell. There's no coordination between like the coin owners and McAfee. It seems obvious to say, oh, if you own a coin, wouldn't you pay John McAfee, $100,000 or whatever to do this promotion, right? Or give him a bunch of token or whatever. Doesn't appear to be the case, but that really does beg a big question. That seems like the potential for some really troubling kind of activity. I mean, I think that's a huge risk.
Let's specifically talk about pump and dumps. Dan, will you define pump and dump?
I would consider a pump and dump something that is bought by a group of people, not with the intention of holding, not with the intention of going long, but just purely to make a quick profit, whether that profit be 20%, 50%, or so on. And then with that group then leaving, someone's left holding this bag of tokens that ends up being worth a lot less than maybe it was initially.
Okay, I tried one of these for research purposes only. And so it was a Telegram channel, and he does a countdown and at a certain time announces the coin to buy. It's an altcoin. And I went in there and it started going up so fast that before I could get any, it had already gone up 1,800%. So 18x in a few minutes. And so I bought in at this crazy number, and then I ended up holding the bag. I ended up trying to sell as it went down, but I did not move my fingers quick enough to buy this on the exchange. And I realized that, I guess I didn't realize, I realized I don't know how to do this. But that for folks that are going to do pump and dumps, I'm just going to say beware, man, because it's first of all, I don't even know if it's legal. I think it is legal. It's just sort of stupid investing. But yeah, it's definitely not all it's cracked up to be.
Gabe, the bag holder.
Yeah,
sounds like
you're welcome. You're welcome.
No, you can lose your head on that.
It just reminds me of people getting Yeezys at midnight or something.
What's Yeezys?
I'm sure they have bots do that.
Word.
Yeah, that's something, Gabe. When you and I were talking about your experience afterwards, you were just saying these people have to have a script, or there has to be something that's there's some kind of automated thing here, because at least as you described it, I mean, flying that kind of multiple in that amount of time is just insane. I mean, that's incredible.
Right. So the ticker comes across on Telegram. I look it up on the exchange. I then have to set a price. I then I have to calculate, wait, how much am I spending? Because it's all in Bitcoin, and my common denominator in my brain, it's actually beginning to learn what 0.0005 Bitcoin is $10, I think. Anyway, getting a baseline for it so you're not spending tons of money, but all those calculations.
The problem is I think we're wired to the US dollar, right? And I think that's something that obviously we can get into later, but I think that we are totally hardwired to think of everything as the US dollar. And now when you go into some of these places, it's okay, well, what is it to Bitcoin? And it changes. It's very volatile.
I've been thinking about that as a theory. I've always said, in the next year or 5 years, there's going to be, 3 to 6 players. It's kind of you always had ABC, CBS, NBC 20 years ago. Now you've got 5 big dominant companies: Amazon, Facebook, Apple. And I'm thinking there will be 3 to 6 sort of dominant cryptocurrencies. But then as I'm going into this, one thought I've had is that sort of hardwired thing you're talking about, Dan, where you know the value of a US dollar, I'm beginning to learn the value of a Bitcoin as a baseline, and I'm thinking is that an argument that there will be one sort of standard cryptocurrency that people kind of can relate to as their baseline, instead of having to translate 6 versions as they're trying to exchange tokens for goods?
I think you're on base there, and I think one of the thing that's hard about Bitcoin value to me is less about thinking about things in terms of different value. If you've spent any amount of time internationally, you spend more than a week in a place, and you start to learn what a euro is worth, or what whatever is worth, and you can look at an apple and be okay, that's what that's worth.
Yeah.
The question has more to do with there's so many decimal points, and so you're used to only considering 10.00, right? And then when you add on 6 more zeros, that becomes a much bigger issue. And so I think in time, long term, people refer to those small fragments as satoshis. I think that's more how we'll talk about it. I mean, I think once if you are in the camp that believes that Bitcoin could be worth $1 million, you're not going to be talking about things in terms of 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin. You're going to be talking about things in terms of Satoshi. And it's just kind of like that's a fundamentally like different way to look at a number. And that's difficult right now. And it's difficult, especially with all the price volatility. But I think in time, it'll kind of, balance out.
For our listeners, explain what you mean by Satoshi.
So when you are looking at the price of something in Bitcoin, it can have 8 numbers after the decimal point. And so one of those, the smallest, possible version of that is a Satoshi. So it's popular, especially when you're looking at like micro cap altcoin trading, and you say, oh yeah, I bought into that one at 100 Satoshi, and I sold at 300. And you're going like, well, what the heck? What is that? And it simply refers to, those decimal places. Like you kind of like just shift your eyes down the line.
Got it. And, what happens when one Satoshi is, multiple US dollars? Let me ask you guys, since we started the podcast, what's been kind of like the biggest thing that you've learned or were proven wrong about? And I'll start with mine from episode 3 and 4, where Brooks Jordan talked about Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin. And my biggest learning from him was I went into the conversation with kind of like this new attitude of, hey, I understand, Bitcoin is first to market, but it's slow. It can't transact very fast. And so there will be many other coins that will come along that are faster and better, and Bitcoin will go away. He convinced me that brand and that sort of first to market positioning was a much bigger deal. And I don't know if he said this or somebody else, but it was a quote that like in the US, 3 out of 10 people have heard of cryptocurrency and 4 out of 10 have heard of Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is bigger. It's like Michael Jordan and Bob Marley, bigger than their industries. Bitcoin is bigger than crypto. Brooks also said it's a shared perception of what something is. That's one of our memes. What does that mean? I think we left out some other. We left out what its is. Reviewing the memes. All right, we'll get better on that. So I'm curious from you guys, like over the course of the last 3 months, what's been something that you kind of like learned and then questioned, thought you knew something, and then realized it was more nuanced or more complicated?
Well, Gabe, I think that Usman hit it right on the head in one thing that he had said, because before I'd gotten involved with this, I was bummed out that, 2010, 2011 happened. I wasn't involved in Bitcoin. Then 2015 happened. I wasn't involved with Ethereum. And his quote was, maybe you missed the boat on Bitcoin or Ethereum, but there's always new currencies. There's always new opportunities. And so that's kind of a big reason why now I'm always constantly looking for what's next, because you're right. It may not be Bitcoin or Ethereum that is, ends up being the largest cryptocurrency in a year or 2 years or 10 years. But the question is that, we need to look. We need to see, okay, what has solid source code? What has a great white paper? What cryptocurrency could lead the pack? And, once we get into predictions, I'll probably divulge a little bit of that. I think that one thing that I learned, and I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's, maybe I shouldn't try and jump on a boat after it's already hit the iceberg. Maybe I should wait, research, then jump.
Along kind of similar lines, when you're talking about like the general growth of this space, I'd say in the beginning, in the middle of the year, I was really excited. I mean, like I was all just bullish on Bitcoin, bullish on everything, telling everyone and their moms and their grandmas to sign up for Coinbase, the whole thing. And the last few months, my personal and professional network has grown, and I've gotten to know some of these people who have, tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars of fiat worth of value in cryptocurrency. And I'm realizing, where the pain points are. And this is one of my predictions. It really kind of like ties into things. We'll get into it, but there are a lot of big questions and a lot of big problems to solve if you really want to see, Bitcoin specifically, but a few others, like achieve the kind of vision that people have laid out for it. I mean, it's not as simple as I thought earlier this year.
Let's just start interspersing predictions. The only reason not to do that is I've got to be more diligent with my note taking here and just check off the things that we cover. But feel free to throw in some predictions if you guys have them. I'm curious right now, or even in the last week or two, which coins you've been looking at. What was it? Verge last week was all the rage, and then it just tumbled. And I've been reading things, people kind of complaining there was a pump and dump. But like, I'm curious, what coins are you guys kind of like? What have you been buying into the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I can jump in here. There are a few. I mean, like my larger point and my larger prediction, not to steer too far away, and I will answer the question, but my bigger picture thing is I realized 2018 is a year where we need to address questions about moving money in and out of the system more effectively. We have. I had a conversation over the holiday weekend with a business associate. He's out in Colorado. He gives me a call and he goes, "Hey, I'm really into Ripple. I think Ripple's going to be the next major listing on Coinbase." And he may be right, he may be not, but we can get back to that. He goes, "I want to put $500,000 into Ripple. How do I do it?" And we sat there on the phone for almost 2 hours talking through like the various steps, how you'd have to get it to an exchange, all that kind of thing. But there was just a severe bottleneck right up front. I couldn't tell him to sign up for Coinbase because, when he signed up for Coinbase, his card limit is $750. His bank wire limit, which takes a week, is $10,000. How does this guy get that kind of money into this thing? And then how does he start moving it around? And it's just like a huge, huge, huge problem, right? So if you really want to see major, institutional money or big, heavy hitter investors get into this thing, we got to find a way to do it better. Coinbase is good for what it is, but the more that I look at it, the closer I get, the more I think that one of these competitors, whether it's Gemini or Abra or any of these other ones, may really be well positioned to take over. And then on the flip side, and this is one that strikes kind of close to home, being a person who's run an initial coin offering, getting money out and not for any purpose like where you're bearish on the market and you want to convert back to fiat, but because there's financial realities. I mean, if you're a company that runs an ICO and you raise $10 million, you raise it in Ethereum and Bitcoin, that's great. But when you have to pay payroll and your employees aren't down for crypto, you need that fiat currency. And there's just no simple way to convert $10 million in Bitcoin or Ether into fiat. And so I look at things now to answer your question, Gabe. I look at things that kind of address these financial services questions. I'm really big into Salt right now, which is a lending platform where you can put up your cryptocurrency as collateral and receive a US dollar loan. I also really like Lend, which is a earlier stage, but same idea. I mean, it just really enables a lot of good liquidity. These are things that are just absolutely necessary because if you can't move money around, things are just going to stall out.
You mentioned Salt. That came out from two of our listeners as their predictions for the next year. They didn't really get specific on what that meant, just that it would be successful. But there's a big need for that. I've kind of thought about the challenge, for a new investor. One of the things that we've been saying for a long time is just sign up with an exchange because of these things. If you're a brand new user on Coinbase, for example, you can't send $100,000 in. They've got tiers, and you've got to kind of have a track record or go through lots of kind of hoops to prove yourself. Do you think that will get a lot more seamless because of just better user interface and technology and new companies, or will that get harder with regulation? What do you guys think about the ability to move money in and out from fiat to crypto?
The reason that Coinbase doesn't allow you to do that on day one is obviously because they are playing by rules that were set up for traditional banking systems, right? They have a lot of Patriot Act things, FinCEN, they have all these different bodies that have all of these different regulations that just aren't ready for this kind of volume and this kind of thing to happen. So I think the real answer is that regulations will change. When people, especially in cryptocurrency, hear the word regulation, they usually get scared. But I think in this case, it's really more of an update, and it should be a good thing.
All right. Before we get into some of the other episodes, let's just put a stake in the ground right now with our first official predictions. Each of us are going to first state, what do you think is going to be the low and the high of Bitcoin in 2018? Let's start with, who wants to start?
I'll jump in. I think I am bullish on Bitcoin. I believe in Bitcoin Core. I'm not one of these people who believes in any of the forks that are currently available or currently being talked about. But I think a lot of people are buying in right now, expecting to earn some kind of big multiple. I don't think it's going to happen in 2018. You're going to see some good fluctuation. I think this time next year, and probably where the high is right around, within 10% or so, probably going to be right around 20,000. I don't think we're going to break deep into the 20s. It might peak at 22. Then I think the floor, we might actually dip into the 9,000 range at some point. I think there are a number of things that can lead there, but my range is 9 to 22, and I think at this time next year we're looking at 20.
I think that's a conservative take. We got you down for 9 as the low, 22 as the high in 2018. Dan?
Yeah. Before we did this or started this, I was like, I'm not going to put any numbers on anything. That wasn't my goal. I didn't want to. And of course, you come up with a question, let's put a number on something. But I guess if I had to be frank about where I think it's going, I think that similarly to what Andrew just said, that there's a lot of people that are going to be looking to make 10 to 50x or 100x. And therefore, money may be pulled out of Bitcoin, specifically early in 2018. So if I had to give a range, I would probably say, I'd say 8 to 20. Everyone's jumping on the 50K Bitcoin. It's coming, but I think that you're going to see, and we'll get into it in what I consider my biggest prediction of 2018, but I just don't see it jumping off the rails in 2018.
Okay, so we've got you as a 7 as a low and 20K as a high.
8 is a low. I don't know about 7.
Okay, 8 is a low. Aaron?
I'm going to go with my boy John McAfee and say it'll peak at like 50K or 60K or something like that.
Pick one. Pick one.
Here we go.
Let's go 55K.
55K. Okay, for the high. How about for the low?
10K.
Okay, 10K. So just from some of our listeners out there, Andrew and Dan are definitely on the conservative side of things here. Oh, let me just throw out there. I'm gonna say 7K low and I'm gonna say 50K high. But I'm gonna say this: the end of 2018, it'll settle right back where it ends at 25K. So low 7, high of 50. I just think that, you look at like Andrew, when you got back from Thanksgiving and you told your mom to buy Bitcoin and she did. And then everybody kind of just saw this holiday thing happen and it went way up. And then the next holiday happened, Christmas, and it kind of didn't do that at all. It kind of been dropping. It feels to me like the whole thing is like this condensed, like it's moving so quickly. I just predict basically a lot of volatility. Co-founder of FinTech, Julian Hosp, he predicts a high of 60K and a low of 5K.
Those are some ranges. I mean, you want to talk about, you just said you think it peaks at 50 and you think it settles for the year around 25. Talk about a bag holder. That's pretty rough.
Cousin David, one of our favorite guests from episode 8 and episode 14, he says Bitcoin will hit 50K. And a listener, Michael Gallo, says that Bitcoin Cash and EOS and IOTA will take a significant part of the market cap of all crypto, and that Bitcoin will drop below 30%. So, okay, quick question for all of you guys.
Yeah, I want to ask just a quick question. We don't have to come to a consensus on this, but I'm just curious, who is buying all that Bitcoin? How do you get to 50K?
I think the fact that 3 in 10 people or 4 in 10, I still talk to friends who are on the edge. They're nervous. Like I have a good handful of friends who still want to buy in. For a month, they've been talking to me, hey, how do I do it? What do I do? And they just haven't pulled the trigger. And I think like there's a lot of money just sitting out there for people who are ready to buy in. You know, it's like the market cap of crypto versus like the NASDAQ is hilariously, giant ratio of contrast.
Yeah, Andrew, I think that Andrew, you said that there's no way to get it to 50K because who's going to buy it? But my argument would be, how do they get to 20K from $100 or $1,000? At the time when people thought, oh, that's the high. Oh, it's way too overpriced. Oh, it's way too overbought. Clearly, there was enough at the time to get it there, and I think that there's going to be a deflationary period in Bitcoin where you realize that 4, 5, 6 million Bitcoin will never be used again just because they're lost or whatever. So I think that, you're going to hit a period where, oh, there's less Bitcoin than we thought. We already know there's a finite amount, but now there's even less than that. And I think that could propel it. That could make it jump 2, 3x. I don't think that's 2018, but I think that's something that's coming down.
I'm just interested. Like, I think like there's clearly a bottleneck right now for the big money, right? So a big move from like, where we are now to 50K isn't necessarily going to come from heavy hitters that are like moving in. And it just requires like a lot of people. And then I wonder, what are all of these people's incentives to be buying Bitcoin? Like, are you talking to people who might buy $1,000 or $2,000 worth or $500 worth? And they like, why are they buying Bitcoin? I don't really see a solid case. And then the other thing, and perhaps the largest point, is I think a lot of people are buying Bitcoin right now as a method of exchange for something else. I think that a lot of people buy Bitcoin as a pass through. And I think that kind of activity is going to continue, and that's going to stifle overall Bitcoin growth. It'll be more transaction volume, but I think, when you're buying and selling that much, you're probably going to see it kind of stagnate a little.
Well, it's kind of segues in a sort of way, talking about Bitcoin, and then I kind of mentioned quickly Bitcoin Cash, which took this incredible leap, and it kind of reveals 2 episodes I want to discuss where, okay, let's start with episode, I think it's 6 with Natalia Ra from Bitcoin.com. She's an old friend of mine from Maui. She's the CFO of Bitcoin.com. And at the time, I had heard that her boss, the CEO, founder, Roger Ver, was this sort of like controversial figure, an early investor in Bitcoin. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know why. And throughout the interview, I kind of started off and said, hey, explain the difference between Bitcoin and Bitcoin.com. And she did very clearly. Bitcoin.com is her company, and Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency, the original, biggest brand leader. But they're, without a doubt, they're playing off of that brand name, and you're getting business from that. And what I kind of learned, and feel free to help me share what this means, but basically Roger Ver was a big proponent of Bitcoin Cash that was a hard fork from Bitcoin, basically keeping a lot of the same algorithm, but allowing it to transact faster. So the idea was that he thinks, that it's holding true to like the original vision, but a lot of people think that he's sort of leveraging his own brand to make a lot of money, off of Bitcoin Cash. And like, what was it in the last month? I think it had like 100x returns. It was some crazy, insane leap. But that was one episode where I wish I'd had more background, and it kind of was like this marked a point of realizing I can't wade into these interviews with just an ignorant curiosity and hope to be successful all the time. I've got to do a little more research and ask, sort of more challenging questions.
Yeah, that was a big opportunity because that's one of the hottest topics in the Bitcoin kind of world right now. And really, like, would love to hear you get another shot at that, because there are a lot of questions to ask.
I mean, I watched a video debate with Roger Ver a couple weeks ago where this guy was just egging him on, calling Bitcoin Cash B Cash, and the kind of thing where like, who cares? But Roger was so offended because B Cash just sounds like he's dismissing it. And he's like, Bitcoin Cash. And I was just like, what is going on here? But it was definitely a triggering situation.
This is also interesting too, because like this was a question or a thing that I realized a few weeks ago when Bitcoin Cash was listed on Coinbase. Is Roger was on CNBC, I think the next day, and I was sitting there going like, man, so Bitcoin Cash goes on Coinbase, big spike in value, right? Because it's being introduced to a lot of people for the first time. And then Roger gets to go on CNBC in front of a lot of people and defend, his position, talk about his project, kind of do this marketing thing. And I was like, Bitcoin doesn't have that. Like that, because Bitcoin, Satoshi, who knows, who it is. It could be a collection of people, could be a person who's no longer with us, could be whatever. Nobody can go there and be like the person, the go-to counterpoint to go on CNBC and debate Roger. And that scared me, because like you're starting to deal with kind of that consumer level of money, people who are watching on TV for their, financial advice and decisions. And you have this person who has clear motives, a centralized, corporate owned thing. It runs counter to a lot of what all of this is all about.
Right. Like the fact that there's no sort of centralized branding messaging for Bitcoin itself. And that's sort of the point. But I think it does make it, it'll be interesting to see, like what happens. Here's a question. Okay. This is sort of an easy one, I think, in a two-part. I'll make it a little more interesting in a two-part question. It's a yes or no. Will Bitcoin still have the largest market cap of all cryptocurrencies by the end of next year?
Yes.
Who is that?
That was Andrew.
Okay, Andrew says yes. Aaron?
Yes.
Dan?
This is my biggest prediction for 2018.
Okay, let's hear it.
Bitcoin is not going to be the largest.
Buckle up, everybody.
Put on your tinfoil hats. Here we go. So Bitcoin is not going to be the largest cryptocurrency.
Oh!
It's not. It started 2017 with an 86% total market share. It started December with a 60% total market share. It currently sits at 44%.
Ooh, I like it. You're backed by data. Okay, I love it.
I dig the chart. I dig the percentage. Dare I ask what you think, or a list of things you think could threaten its position? Or
perfect. That's great. I see their biggest competitors as Ripple and Litecoin. With faster processing times.
No Benjacoin.
I think with faster processing times, Ripple and Litecoin become the most attractive for those looking to make day-to-day transactions. And I personally dealt with this the other day. I went to send a small amount of money between exchanges, and I was looking at my fee, and I calculated it to US dollars because, again, I'm hardwired to that. And my fee for Bitcoin would have been about $7 or $8. My fee for Litecoin was 20 cents.
Wow.
And Litecoin's blocks, for example, are 4 times larger than Bitcoin. And my final point on that, actually, Andrew just brought it up, is, this kind of reminds me of the Pepsi Coke phenomenon, where people that taste the two sodas blind would choose Pepsi, but most would choose Coke due to the advertising. So you've got Charlie Lee being the face of Litecoin, Roger Ver can be the face of BCH, and Satoshi remains pseudonymous. So yeah, that's my big prediction now that you brought it up and you asked it in a question. So I don't think Bitcoin will be the largest. I think because once it goes on, and that kind of leads me to just one other thing real quick, that new cryptocurrencies on Coinbase experience unwanted and unfair gains.
Yeah.
If Ripple ends up on Coinbase, it'll go up 4 to 8x, and that's all. 8x would be all that it needed to overtake, all that it needs to overtake Bitcoin as the largest in market cap.
Do you think if a coin at any moment surpasses the Bitcoin market cap, even for a second, does that right there, like, is that a certain sort of like pop in the bubble of confidence where people just know, like, wow, even for a second, something else could do it, and could that cause Bitcoin to just tumble?
I don't think it's like saying something else, a stock comes out and it's worth more than gold, right? Gold is worth $1,300 an ounce, but how do you quantify it? I don't think it's necessarily the downfall of Bitcoin just because something dethrones it. I think it's something that's huge, because ever since the beginning, Bitcoin has been the one. And the fact that, during, what was it, March or April of this year, when Ethereum kind of skyrocketed to 300 or 400, it tested it. It never actually made it close, but it tested it. I think that something that dethrones Bitcoin, there will be a conversation, but I don't think that sends Bitcoin into a spiral. Honestly, I think that may end up triggering people to then buy Bitcoin again.
Do you think a lot of people are still like playing catch up with this whole thing? like a lot of people that I know, like my parents and like older, aunts and uncles, like they're asking me like, hey, what's a Bitcoin? I feel like a lot of those people might kind of catch up to this whole thing and just start buying Bitcoin with no real aim, like you're mentioning earlier. And I feel like that could just boost Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true, and I mean that speaks to one of the things I'm a little scared of with Bitcoin Cash is that Coinbase doesn't do a great job of like describing the various cryptocurrencies that it offers. So if you are, I'm going to say uninformed buyer, and I don't mean that in any kind of like disparaging way. I just mean like if you don't like know the difference between all these things, and if you sign up for Coinbase and you're going like, okay, I have $500, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin, and then you see, Bitcoin is, let's say it's 15, or Bitcoin Cash is 3. Oh, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin Cash, and it's not super clear that it's something totally different, and in the same way, Litecoin $300, Ether $500 to $700. If Ripple finds its way to Coinbase, $1 to $5, who knows? You're kind of like, that seems risky. I mean, that's scary.
I mean, I think you cannot overstate that point. I have literally a half dozen friends who have asked me, should they buy Litecoin or something like that because Bitcoin is, $16,000, and I'm like, you can just buy a 0.01 of Bitcoin. They're like, what? The concept is it's not conventional wisdom,
Right. Dan, I want to just push you a little further on this. I agree with you that I think one of these fast transaction coins will end up being a big winner somewhere. I don't know that it'll be number one or whatever, but it'll be like a big winner. What do you look for in determining who that winner is? Like what decides who wins?
What I look for are twofold. I look for block size and transaction fees, right? So, I mean, I had that experience the other day where I was trying to send the equivalent of a couple $100 US, and I was looking at a $7 transaction fee for Bitcoin. So I just exchanged it on the exchange for Litecoin, and then did the same thing, and it cost 27 cents. And long term, that's going to make people angry. I mean, if the average transaction cost is $40 on the Bitcoin network, as opposed to like 62 cents on Ethereum or Litecoin, over a long period of time for day-to-day transactions, which I think was the initial premise of having, a decentralized network like Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, for day-to-day purchases, that it just simply doesn't make sense. I mean, that's more than your tax on buying that cup of coffee just to transact.
I've the last few weeks found myself debating, Ripple, and Ripple has some like fundamental kind of like systemic questions to it. But like Ripple, Litecoin, and I've kind of been trying to dissect this from all angles. And as an e-commerce entrepreneur myself, I keep on thinking like, okay, like if I'm Amazon, or if I'm a small web shop, like who am I picking and why? And then what kind of messaging, like what kind of marketing effort would it have to take for me to understand like it's okay for me to accept Litecoin or Ripple or any of these others? And I've really just been jamming on that. I don't have an answer, but it's I think that's the big question that people have to solve. It's not necessarily what do people have, because people will get it if they need it. If they can buy stuff on Amazon for 5% less because they own Litecoin or whatever, they'll get it. But it's more about the business side, I think.
The prediction stuff is I think a lot of fun. Let me run through the rest of the past podcasts, ask you guys what your favorites are, and then let's get into the predictions. I think this is the fun stuff. So we kind of left off talking about episode 5 with Usman, and then we had the Bitcoin.com CFO, Natalia. One of the sort of sleeper episodes is with Ryan Flint, episode 10, where the title is Solutions to the Energy Conundrum of Mining. And he's with a group that has Kilowatt Hour Coin. And what I loved about this one is this was an episode that was released November 19th. And then the next week, for a couple weeks, I got sent by a lot of friends on Facebook this article that was going around discussing, this issue of how much power mining is taking, how much electricity it's taking to mine all the Bitcoin in the world. And it felt one of these moments where I was just like, hey, listen, we've already covered this in the podcast. So that was episode 10. Our leading episode for a long time was out of the gate, number 12, with Miko Matsumura, old school Java evangelist, founder of Evercoin from Pantera Capital, just a well-known guy in the crypto space.
Love Miko.
Yeah, Miko's awesome. And just to quickly summarize, the next one was with Dan Gailey with Synapse.ai. That's one where it was way over my head. I think that I'll listen in like a year, and I think we'll understand more about what he's talking about, because he was really getting to like the ownership of data. And I think that'll be a big issue in 2018 is like, I think the frustration people have with, Facebook and Google owning all this, our web behavior and our click behavior, and us not having access to that. I think it's going to be a much, much bigger issue in 2018. And people will
I think it'll be much bigger in the future. I think that's like a decade-long issue right there. I mean, that's something that if you don't mind, I think that episode, listening to Dan talk about how data can be used and how to add it to the blockchain, allow you to physically see what these companies are getting from you, seems like something that in the future could be very beneficial. It's not like a lot of cryptocurrencies where it's like they're creating a problem in search of a solution, but there is an actual problem, and it's a multi-billion-dollar problem that people clearly, cannot see what data is being collected. One, two, we live in a society that's supposed to be free and open along with the web, and yet there are, I would assume, terabytes upon terabytes of data about all of us in regards to what our searching habits are, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that episode is so far ahead of its time.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It leads to, okay, this is one of my predictions for 2018. I'm thinking that level of frustration, coupled with people's education and understanding of really what does it mean that these companies own all the data on our behavior, linked into the volatile political climate that we're in right now. I'm going to say that there's going to be a new political party that might exist right now, but a political party will rise up. It'll be a top 5, political party where they're going to raise 50% or more of their funding all in crypto. And it'll be tied to their message, tied to their theme of power to the people.
Yeah, I can see it. I can totally see it. I can also say I've been thinking a lot lately about how much the current political process currently runs on crypto as is. Of course, I think you're speaking to something that's more philosophical and talking about decentralization and less like central ownership. But I think there's a lot of like games being played with money in politics that's being done over cryptocurrency. So I think the political class and the people that are in that world, have a firmer grasp on this than I think maybe a lot of people think.
And Gabe, you said top 5 political party, and to do that in 2016, the 5th most votes were 728,000. So if you could garner, I'm just saying, it was Evan McMullen, part of the Independent Party. So if you could garner, I'm assuming you can get more than 1 million people to vote in regards to a decentralized world. Country. I'm
glad you did that research, because I think I think there's going to be that guy, that multi-millionaire that's been putting out the ads to impeach Trump, and he got like 3 million signatures. I think we're going to see a merging of sort of the grassroots fundraising that Obama had and Bernie had. I've got another prediction here. Do you guys want to throw in anything else before I do that?
It's your podcast, Gabe the bag holder.
So, all right. So one of my favorite future guests, Jackson Palmer, creator of Dogecoin, he was really supportive when we did episode 11 and interviewed a lot of his friends at the meetup. He puts out a great video series. It's really educational. And he recently said that increase of apps to share money that are from established companies, like Venmo, where lots and lots of people are sharing money with their apps, with their phones, with Venmo. Apple Pay taking off. He sees that as a threat to crypto being the standard for sharing money. So he said that, and I gave it some thought, and I thought because he basically says these apps with crypto require that you kind of like put in some money and then establish a connection with somebody else and have this predetermined sort of baseline for who you're sharing money with. And that was his argument saying that it makes it harder for crypto exchanges of money to get on the scene. And I just thought, of Snapchat. So my prediction is basically the Snapchat of crypto money exchange will happen in 2018, where like it won't be me and my generation. It'll be like 18 to 22-year-olds who suddenly out of the blue find a really established kind of like a clique of money exchange, and it's all crypto, and it kind of like surprises all of us with some weird Snapchat user interface, but that there will be some establishment of a new product that is the Snapchat of money exchange for crypto.
I dig it. I think a lot of that speaks to the access question in a slightly different way, but it speaks to that access question. Coinbase, even if you just want to buy $500 worth of something like Bitcoin, still requires a lot of verification. It's anywhere from a 10 to 20 step process. I think that if you had something that made it super, super easy, and of course, there's a lot of legal questions, but if you made it something that was just super, super easy, you're going to see that kind of demographic cling to it, and you'll probably see it pop. I could totally see it.
Yeah, if it was like a crypto Venmo, I think it would fly.
Hey, there's a free startup idea here in the Color and Crypto podcast. Any of our listeners?
Yeah, I think that'll happen. Okay, here's another prediction. This is one from Stephen Thomas, the CTO at Ripple. He says 2018 will be the birth of hybrid blockchains. And what he means is that instead of new coins being built on top of what mostly happens now, where ERC20 tokens are set up, they'll be replaced by launching what he calls mini blockchains that are kind of using the same technology, but accessing multiple blockchains at one time, kind of an abstraction layer on top of that. And honestly, I don't know the technology well enough at all to explain what that means, except that it sounds like it's freeing itself from these kind of like independent blockchains.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that comes up a lot when people talk about transaction speed. And, perhaps one of the solutions isn't necessarily a new coin with a really fast, with big blocks and fast transaction times and things like that. Perhaps it's a secondary layer where some kind of central party, which is kind of the controversial point, some kind of central party assumes risk and just starts facilitating these things faster, kind of as a layer on top of a Bitcoin blockchain or something like that. You can think like Visa or MasterCard and how they can do billions and billions of transactions in fractions of a second. That's the kind of thing that we need to be aiming for. And it can be difficult to do that as just one blockchain. There needs to be several components to it, maybe another layer. And unfortunately, at least the way that my brain works and the way that I look at it, and maybe I'm wrong, I think there needs to be some kind of corporate or centralized thing that facilitates that sort of thing.
All right, guys, what else do you have as predictions, if anything, for next year, 2018 in crypto?
I think we're going to see 50 new episodes of Color in Crypto.
Yes.
Very excited about it. I think we're going to 10x the ownership. So buy your Color in Crypto now on the whatever exchange. And I think it's going to be a great year for the pod, if nothing else.
Who are some guests that you're looking forward to hearing on the podcast on Color in Crypto?
Jamie Dimon.
Yeah?
Whew.
Can we get him? I wonder if he has a change. I wonder if he'll change his tune next year. Who else?
Can we get John McAfee?
Right? Ooh.
John McAfee.
McAfee.
You can get McAfee in, but you can't let him pump anything. So maybe he'd be out on that. I don't know. I think I'd love to hear more. One thing that I really love about what Color in Crypto has done so far is we've really brought in a lot of different people. You've brought in people who are new. You've brought in hedge fund managers, people from Bitcoin Cash, all over the map, right? There's a million different ways to understand cryptocurrency, and Color in Crypto is trying to hit all of them. I think that's awesome. One thing I'd really love to see in 2018 are some of the haters. I'd love to see, Dan's point, I think he was half joking, but I'd really love to hear that interview.
Yeah.
And dig in, for 30 to 60 minutes, really make them defend their position. Because in some cases, and I think Jamie's point is actually misunderstood. I don't think that he's actually that firm against it. We don't need to get into it. But you see people like Mark Cuban, was talking about how it's a bubble. Mark Cuban was totally against it, yada, yada, yada. And now he's investing in these things, So there's a lot of like opinions kind of changing, and there's a lot of debate going on. And I think it just like having these informed debates would be really, really awesome to hear.
Yeah, I would love to get some of those folks on. And I mean, one thing that it's become very clear that sounds obvious, but it wasn't to me in the beginning. But we've got a long list of guests that want to be on the podcast. Most of the queued up guests are launching ICOs. And so it's really getting an understanding of like, okay, wait, are we going to start sort of doing paid promotional spots and announcing that, and then having like bigger guests that we really chase after come on? Because it gets a little bit sort of tiresome if every episode is, kind of like a promotion of a certain coin.
People are constantly getting pitched. And I don't think that we should like, obviously like rule out any like ICO things, but really, and Gabe, I know that you'll be solid on this. I think it's important to stress like the listeners, should expect that like we're not just going to be shills for something. We can ask critical questions. We can disclose when this is something where they have like an upcoming project, and kind of do your diligence kind of stuff. I mean, like we're the good guys, I think there's a lot of good value in talking to people who are launching projects, but we're not just going to let them come on here and just shill.
One of my favorite predictions came from one of my favorite podcasts, which is Make Me Smart with Kai Ryssdal and Molly Wood. And Molly Wood's prediction for 2018 in crypto is that a government will create its own digital currency. And I misquoted her on Twitter and said a U.S. government. And she was so kind and corrected me and responded, and then said thanks. We got her on the crypto predictions for 2018.
That's awesome. Any thoughts from Aaron or Dan? Like what's the government that you think is leaning into this the hardest?
Well, one of my predictions actually kind of revolved around this in regards to, I think that the SEC and IRS are going to end up teaming up trying to enforce capital gains on crypto in general in 2018. I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, we're seeing it now this week in South Korea, the government forcing people to use their real names when buying cryptocurrency. And I think what we saw with Coinbase being forced to hand over all transactions of, 10K or more from 2013 to 2015 is just the beginning. The government loves databases, and we're probably about to create another.
Yep.
I mean, like, and universally, it seems like the crypto community is against this kind of thing there's some obvious reasons, and then there's some like fundamental, like what cryptocurrency is all about kind of reasons. But if you're one of these people who's buying crypto and then selling it and converting back to fiat, I mean, like, what do you expect to happen? I mean, anytime that you're buying an asset and then selling it for a gain, you pay taxes on it. I don't, like, what's the question? I don't understand the debate here.
All right, guys, this has been a good roundtable, and what I would like to hear as we kind of like close this out is, which of the Color and Crypto podcasts do you recommend your family and friends listen to if they want to learn about this? And then separately, what's your favorite episode so far?
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't tell you how many people I've sent to the Cousin David episode, to kind of like serve as a jumping off point. People who know nothing about Bitcoin but are curious, or cryptocurrency, whatever. I think that's the first Cousin David episode is really rock solid in that regard. And of course, love Miko. So that's the bar, Gabe.
I'm gonna go ahead and say, and I think that the answers are exactly the same for mine. I would say that for both people that are new and my favorite episode are both Miko.
Yeah.
I think that I think he described the best use case for cryptocurrency as a whole.
So that's episode 12.
He's a public speaker, very eloquent, not to mention very easy to edit, which also helps. I happen to rank episodes based on how easy they are to edit, and he is by far and away number one, because he's a public speaker, so obviously he does it. He talks about it. I recently saw him at a conference in San Francisco and was again just as blown away. I was like, well, I wouldn't have to edit that speech either.
Yeah,
I think
He's so good, and what I just cracked me up was like I thought the first 4 minutes of the conversation were sort of roundabout, kind of like not sticking to a thing, but really interesting, and he was eating peanuts the whole time, and finally I was like, okay, Miko, let's get started, but you got to put that bag of peanuts down. He's like, okay, and he'd basically been doing that to make the audio bad and not usable, so that he could kind of like command control of the structure, which was brilliant.
It's a huge pro move. I mean, that's great.
I think we kind of all had the same episodes. Mine was going to be Cousin David as well. It's a little unfair because I specifically asked, like, which podcast should I listen to if I, to learn more about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and whatnot, like when I first started. And I'm pretty sure Gabe and possibly the rest of you all said, the Cousin David episode. So yeah, I mean, I would also suggest that one if you're just starting out. And it ended up being one of my favorite ones too, along with the Miko episode, because he was just so good.
All right, there it is. So episode 8, Cousin David. Episode 12, Miko. Episode 14, The Return of Cousin David. And it's funny, Miko came out of the gate and was the most popular, like I said, but then episode 14 with our new Spotify stats, when you add in Cousin David for Spotify, he is the clear, that episode, number 14, is the most downloaded episode. So there you have it. The predictions.
We should send them a Bitcoin cake or something.
Bitcoin cake.
Congratulations, the top episode of the year.
Well, I just want to say thank you, and again, I'll start with our newest member. Thank you, Aaron, for coming in strong and really helping elevate the product we're releasing. Love your creative ideas and your execution. Dan, couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for all of your editing and staying up late and getting it always in on schedule. And thank you, Andrew, for being the reason this can happen, being the source of it all, and really kind of just being dedicated. I think I told you, a year or two ago I wanted to do a podcast, and then you finally were like, dude, let's do it. Here it is. Let's go. And so thank you for being the foundation and making it happen.
No, it's a great podcast that I guess all of you guys, I have very little to do with this, but are putting together, and I'm really stoked to see where this goes in 2018.
All right. Well, happy New Year, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of the Coloring Crypto community. Always tweet at us at Coloring Crypto. Let us know what you think, what questions you have, and what guests you want to hear on the show. We love your feedback. And here we are, end of 2017. Looking forward to a 2018 in cryptocurrency.
Subscribe now.